Hello, everyone. Welcome to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. We are here today with Jon Asher, who is a PR pro, who's going to be talking to us about all sorts of PR things, pitching, networking, all sorts of fun stuff, good information for you. And first, I just want to say thank you for coming and joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And so just to get us started, though, like most people, like I know who you are, Curtis knows who you are, but this is a new podcast. Most people may not know who you are who are listening. So could you just start off with like giving us a little bit of a background on what you do, who you are, where you come from, all that fun stuff?
Jon Asher, I run Asher Media Relations. I'm based in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I've been doing PR since 2007 in the music industry. I started in hip hop, working for a hip hop label. And then I rambled in folk and rock. And then I ended up in my true passion of metal. And that's it. I've been doing it for years, working for multiple Canadian metal fests in Canada. I take care of the VOC in Canada and USA PR also, and then various labels and indie bands and established bands, and just making sure the word gets out for the press, in print, online, radio. Nowadays, Spotify is like one of the big knacks from every band. And yeah, just making sure the message gets out, right? In such a saturated market as it is, right? So
yeah, it's a pretty saturated market. So it's quite a journey that you've had, and you started in hip hop and then went through several different genres. Were you always a fan of metal, or did you just like transition into metal? Did you discover it later or something?
I started actually in a band. That's how it always starts with. I think a lot of people in the industry, you're in a band and you fall in love with just being in a band and creating music. So I started in a band when I was like 16, 17 as a kid. And then from there, I slowly trial and error, learned a lot of things in the music scene in Montreal. Then I went into concert promotions and yeah, I just kind of developed and networked on the scene. And I also like ended up working in radio as an intern here in Montreal at CJD Talk Radio and Shome and their promotions department, which led to PR. But I was studying, I ended up going to school at McGill for corporate PR, not really thinking I would go into music PR. My goal was to really just go corporate. I moved to Toronto. I landed an internship with Much Music, but then I got the job and then they called me back and said, you know what, I know I said I give you the job, but we're going with somebody else. So that crushed me.
Oh,
and that was the epiphany, because I was in Toronto for a few months looking for a job in corporate PR, and all I kept getting was job interviews. I was fresh out of university, no experience, except whatever internship I did at the radio station and stuff. And so it was getting frustrated. And my epiphany was, screw this, because I'm just going to come back to Montreal where I know what's best. And I'm going to use the skills I learned in corporate PR and I'll apply them to the music industry. And honestly, the corporate PR is different from music PR.
Yeah.
So I actually had to learn a lot of things on the go. Things I thought I could apply from the corporate PR could not be applied to the music PR at all. So
no, definitely. I've done corporate PR too, and it's a whole different beast.
So that's how it is. I'm here by I don't know. I just ended up doing it. And my main goal was honestly not to work for myself. I was just like, no one's gonna hire me right now. I'll just prove that I can do this stuff on my own, and somebody will come along and offer me a job. And that didn't happen. I just kept having bands come to me and being like, yo, we need PR and we hear you're pretty good. Can we hire you? And I was like, okay. And it just went on from there and there, so that's how it all happened in a nutshell.
Nice.
A large nutshell. No, I'm just teasing you. No, there's a lot there and a lot of experience. And it sounds like you built a really powerful network outside of doing like social media and stuff like that. Cause I know that like Curtis and we both build our network mainly through social media, but it sounds like yours has come mainly from the outside of, the Twitter platform and Facebook and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So do you have any like advice or tips for bands on where they should look to network that aren't necessarily social media?
honestly, it's old school like the bands do touring.
Mhm.
When I first started, Facebook was just becoming a thing around 2007, I believe, right? So it was just Twitter was new. So like I took my roots of what I learned in school. It's like you just meet people in person. That's how you get done. So I spent a lot of time because Toronto was the main hub for the Canadian music industry. So I spent 1 to 2 times a month going back and forth between Montreal and Toronto, just networking because there were so many industry things going on in Toronto all the time compared to Montreal. So like I would go for North by Northwest, Canadian Music Week. Those were the two main ones I would always travel to every year. Then if I had an opportunity to go to the Junos, I would go to the Junos to network. And then when I worked for the hip hop label, I got a lot of more experience because I got to go to LA. I got to meet people in Los Angeles and stuff. And then I went to New York City with them and met more people in New York City. And then I went to South by Southwest and met more people there and networked. So it was just continuing traveling and investing time and money into those things and building personal relationships I found were the best network for me. And then, I travel across Canada for the music festivals I work for. I like to be on site. I don't think a publicist should be far away while these events are going down. Like Armstrong Metal Fest, we had TV interviews with Global and stuff, and I like to be on site, making sure everything runs smooth. You can't put it all, they got so much other things with the festivals going on. So, and then just networking and meeting the bands and the managers and the tour managers, et cetera, et cetera. And once you make a personal relationship with these people, hanging out, not necessarily talking about the music industry, just hanging out over beers and stuff and shooting the shit over hockey or whatever. I felt
It wouldn't be Canada without hockey, right?
yeah. I felt, building the personal bonds and stuff and the relationships with these people was key. For, I've always seen the outcome is, and I tell bands this too. It's like, if you're in the music industry, you're not in it to make a quick relationship. You're in it to make relationships for the next 20, 30 years with people, right? I've spoken to media guys who've been writers for 40 years, they're older than me and stuff. So it's about building long-term relationships too. It's for the long run. If you really want to survive in the music industry in general, as an artist or as industry, you have to build your long-term relationships with everybody to make it work, because you see a lot of bands, they go for the quick route sometimes, I find, and they burn their relationships because they got what they wanted and they don't think of the aftermath, right? They don't believe in maybe keeping up the relationships or whatever, so anyways, that's it. It's just, honestly, I'm a fan of hitting the road and touring, and if I get opportunities to tour with the bands, I love hitting the road. I love the idea of being in a new city every day and meeting new people. That's honestly super, super fun for me. And you get a perspective of what life on the road is and how hard this industry is for the musicians themselves too. When I toured with Stryker on the Steel Panther tour 2 years ago, it's like you drive in, you set up, you do the show, you take down, you drive some more, and and then you're meeting and greeting fans, and it's just so time consuming and tiring. You don't get sleep, and on top of that, they have to write and record everything and then do everything else, right? So it's so much hard work, and it makes me empathize sometimes with the artists, because you work so hard to get so little sometimes, and sometimes you work so hard and you get so much, right? It depends on the situations. But networking to me is one of the key factors in general as a publicist and as music industry. You've got to, it's a publicist's goal and industry goal. You should know who the players are everywhere and anywhere, right? The music industry is actually really small. It's not large. It's really, really small, actually. Everybody knows everybody.
Yep.
So I
Definitely.
want to just one quick second. So John, just out of curiosity, so now that, I mean, you haven't been able to tour obviously or go really meet anywhere one for like the past year. So how have you been able to translate what you normally do into the social media digital realm successfully, or do you still feel like you're
Honestly, all I'm managing, I'm on like a cancel tour.
what?
Cancel tour.
What does that mean?
You know, I'm expected to announce that the festivals aren't going to be happening.
Oh, those, yeah, I get it.
That's,
I get it.
that's what I'm joking about.
Yeah,
I did Armstrong 2 weeks ago. They were hoping we could maybe get 2021, but no, it doesn't look like that way with the health restrictions and stuff. So that's fine. We amp it up for 2022, and I think that's what's going to happen for a lot of things. End of 2021, 2022. So basically, it's just re-emphasizing the message that we're gone this year, and it's understandable with the current situation, COVID. And please look forward to supporting us in 2022 when we're all back and ready to go to hit the mosh pit and have a fun time. And I think it's going to go strong in the music industry. Everybody's stir crazy without shows right now.
do you just before Corinne takes back over, do you think that some of these festivals may not return due to this year? Like, just out of curiosity, I'm not trying to be negative, just asking.
I think in Canada they will, because they got
Sure.
a financial support from the government.
Good point. Good point.
So there's a lot of government funding provincially and nationally, and then municipally. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of festivals are going to be fine if they reach out and find those aids.
Resources.
Saying
Yeah.
there's a bunch of money in Canada that artists in general are not informed about, don't know that there's there, but there's lots of money by the Canadian government for artists.
Yep.
US, I don't know. Maybe some in the US will falter. It depends. They're more on an investment, right? They have investors and stuff. So, and then Europe, I think Europe's going to be fine, because also with the population in Europe, they have enough to support their festivals. It's a difference, right? The population in Europe, it's like you got 80,000 people in a really small square radius, right? Compared to Canada, it's like every 7 hours there's a city.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
I think they're fine. I think a majority are going to come back, and some have been doing the GoFundMe's, and what I love about some of them is just the fans are there. They want these festivals back. They love the experiences that these festivals give. So why just sit out on the side and watch them burn and die? I think if you really truly passionately enjoy these events, you'll support them for the future. They've been around so long, so it's like, why let COVID win?
Yep, I agree.
I've definitely noticed that actually with, the festivals and the bands and everything. It's the fans have really like come out in force to support the bands that they love, be it, merch or GoFundMe's or Patreon or whatever. I've seen a lot of that lately and over the past year in general, with bands just coming out and, helping keep these people going and keeping them alive. And yeah, it won't be enough for everybody, but I think you're right that a lot of them are going to survive just because of their fans and how dedicated they are.
Yeah. Bands are nothing without fans. It's a slogan right there alone,
Yeah.
So, and if the fans really love their bands and want them to stick around, they'll support them, so we just got to wait it out. Be patient.
Yeah, I'm not so good at being patient for shows to return.
It's what's sad
get the urge to mosh in my living room occasionally. It's
sad because it's a big revenue stream for bands, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know from experience, because that's what I did on the Striker tour with Steel Panther. I was their merch bitch, and I enjoyed it. It was a great experience. I got to really have a one-on-one with fans and stuff. But also, you notice how much, like, you see how much Steel Panther selling, you see how much Striker selling, and you're like, damn, you know what? The tour revenue from merch sales is really good. It's a real lifeline for the bands to support them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's expensive itself. So if you can pay off your expenses on the road too, and then you know, profit some more for everything else, you're in good shape.
Agreed.
Definitely. And then so flipping gears from networking and touring to PR, that's mainly what I know you for, is you do PR. So we've talked a lot on here about, you know, different things that bands do that either they're not ready for PR when they reach out, or mistakes that they make when they're reaching out to somebody for PR. So what is the like number one pet peeve of Jon Asher when a band is reaching out? Like, we've all discussed our pet peeves. So what's yours?
One of my big pet peeves is bands message me constantly and they're like, hey, we're releasing this, and all they do is send a Facebook link. And honestly, that doesn't help me. What I need to do is hear what you got. And that's my first rule. I need to hear it first. And I think any industry is like, I need to hear this album you're planning to release. It's kind of, you know, they assume that you're already on board or whatever. And it's like, no. So I think a lot of bands sometimes forget etiquette. It's just like, what do you want to provide to people for them to be convinced to be like, you know what, I want to do this project and help you with the PR on it. So a lot of should not just be like, I'm in this band, here's our Facebook, we're releasing an album, let us know if you want to work with us.
Yeah.
And I can't justify that, you know, I can't make a decision on that. So my usual reply is, do you have the album? Is production done? Can I hear something? You know, and then we go further, singles, do you have any videos, you know, because we have to do in the back end, press kits, news releases, you know, placements, everything. And I need to know what this project is. I also like to ask, what's your touring experience pre-COVID? You know, how many people are known for you on the road and stuff? Have you opened for big bands? You know, stuff like that. Any big festival feats or, you know, awards or anything, you know, that makes you look bigger than you are in a sense. Because PR to me is the art of perception too. You know, you want to make them look bigger than they are, so people are convinced, hey, this is something worth checking out. So, but general, just have the music. Just send
Have the music.
music. You know, I get that sometimes. Oh, it's not ready. Then I'm like, I can't decide if I want to work with you. I'm not gonna, you know, it's a no-brainer. When the music's ready, send it to me.
Bands think they're going to McDonald's sometimes. I notice, John, like they're just putting in an order, and it's like they're like, how much you cost, and then this is, and yeah, and they don't get it.
I was also going to mention my other pet peeve is they come to me and they've released a ton of singles off the album already.
Yeah.
And like, oh man, you've released 3/4 of this album online already everywhere, and I can't do much with that, you know. Or another pet peeve, of course, is like, you come to me like 2-3 months after you released it and you're looking for PR, and it's like, I can't do much. It's old news unless you have some new music videos or lyric videos to promote it, promotional content. It's kind of hard. I don't like going to press guys and being like, hey man, they got a new album, it dropped in November 2020. You know, so
That's actually a pet peeve that I haven't covered of my own, is when I get a PR person, and it's usually somebody who's sketchy, to put it politely, who is sending me something that's like 4 to 6 months old, saying, oh, they dropped a new album, but it came out last summer or something like that. And it's like, why did you take these people's money, you jerk? You know, you're not going to get coverage with something that's 6 months old.
Yeah.
There's a company that does that. John probably is going to get mad at me for naming names, but I know Against does this frequently. That's actually one of their pitches, is that they will promote your album that's like up to like, I think 3 years old or something goofy like that. And they charge like 20. Basically what they're doing is they're just charging $20 for a blast is what it is.
I know of them. I don't, you know, it is. You
The
know,
one that I'm thinking of charges a lot more than $20. I'm not
Okay.
going to name names,
Yeah.
but they charge
I-
a lot more.
Yeah, I don't want,
So, and they have pitched me things that are very old, and I'm just like, why are you doing this?
there's
At
some
people's
that
time.
unfortunately prey on the dire, right? So
Mhm.
Yeah.
fortunate, but I
Yeah.
you know, I always believe you're only as good as your reputation in PR and in the music industry in general. So like, working stuff like old releases and stuff, then that's how the media is going to look at you. Sometimes I'm always in panic mode every day. I'm like, oh, why did I pitch it this way? Now that media outlet's going to think I'm an idiot and never cover anything else I do. So I think image is everything too, in the music industry too, a bit. How you approach people and present things, and you know you learn along the way. I still make errors sometimes doing that. It's just I'm in
Everybody does.
gun ho. I'm like, oh shit, I sometimes like doing the underdog thing. I'm like, oh, what are the chances of this really happening? Very slim, but let's throw a Hail Mary and try it. You know, so, but yeah, but I think what's key is just everything's got to be professionally presented, and going back to like old albums, old releases, just I'm majority of the time I pass, unless the only way around it is if you have a new music video
Mhm.
or a lyric video, those two things, or playthroughs for indie bands, but it brings it's I go back to like the corporate PR mentality. I'm like, okay, we're going to use the secondary tool to get to the primary tool, which,
Yeah.
secondary is the
Mhm.
primary is the album and the band, and we're just trying to create awareness using the secondary for the primary, and done. But you can't sell the band on these huge expectations. I got an email yesterday, can we get Rolling Stone? And I'm like,
oh,
Oh,
I
dear.
hate those. I hate those.
real, I'm like, no.
No.
No, absolutely, probably not.
Yeah.
You're just not there. You don't have anything newsworthy or story angle wise that I think is Rolling Stone worthy. You know what I mean? Like that too. I think as publicists, it's our jobs to see what level of media a band can really get. Depending where they are on the spectrum. If they're fresh debut album with no press in the past, no tour experience, they're fresh, I won't necessarily go after the big boys. I don't think it's necessary. We got to build you on the smaller blogs and the social media, and then it's a progressive build up the metal ladder, as I call it. Step by step, and then the second album, and then you put the third album. And I think some bands still get jaded. It's like they see their big bands, and it's like, dude, they've been putting out releases for 20 years, and that's why they're this huge right now. They've just been working, and building. So
Or they're already connected. That is a huge.
it's politics too, a bit, connections, who representation of them, and label, indie band, a label gets you more in the door, management gets you more in the door, who are you touring with, big tours get you in the doors.
Yep.
So but you got to build those relationships. It goes back to that too. So
Definitely. Curtis, do you have any questions? I'm
Well,
sure you have. I'm sure you have like 6,000.
I do. Okay, so I'm going to take over just for a brief minute then. So John, what do you do in that case, you personally? Because I know what I do when a band says to me, they come and they're new, and their intro email basically says, we want Kerrang, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, Stereo Gum, and Spin. I usually delete and say thank you, but go to someone else. What do you do?
I actually just say, I will give you a realistic point of view right now, and you are not ready for those outlets. And I pointed out in the email I point out the negatives against them, right?
Cool. Yep.
And then if they want to still work with me for being honest and true and get the reality check that it is, then yes. If not, but that's before I have to listen to it, of course, first.
Yeah.
But then I give them the reality check. That happened this week. I gave a band a complete reality check on their release, and that I don't think it was necessary. This is their third album, but they hadn't necessarily done any PR in the past. They were
Yep.
a label that
Mhm.
didn't do well with them at all on that their second release. And I was like, yeah, we're starting from scratch in reality, because you do a simple Google search and there wasn't even much press on them. So it was just real. I'm like, I'm not going to sell you guys that you're Metal Injection worthy or Metal Hammer worthy or Loud Wire or any of that stuff. We are going to work you on the smaller and medium sized blogs and websites and then radio, etc. And build it, because it's also a first impression. If I sent this to Kerrang or Metal Hammer or whatever as the first time and they look at you and it's just, no, it's not. You want to wait for the right time and the right moment. Sometimes, like I said, I sometimes make those errors because I'm just hoping for that Hail Mary, but
Yeah.
but realistically, and I just believe honesty is the best policy in the music industry, because it
I
goes
agree.
back to your reputation. And if they don't like it, because I've had that tons of times. I had a band a while back that I listened to it and I did not like it. And their reply was, I wasn't going to hire you anyways. So my reply was, I took that as a nasty reply. So I replied, then why'd you waste my time?
Yeah.
And their reply was, you're so rude. And I was like, whatever. And they blocked me so fast. And I was like, whatever. But I was still like that. I shouldn't have maybe been like that. That hurt my reputation a bit, whatever, with that band. But it's stuff like that, you just, honesty is still the best, if whether they like it or not. It's sometimes artists, I've seen this multiple times. Sometimes artists just keep going on in their career and wondering why nothing is working. And it's
Yeah.
because their circle of friends or their circle of their team just keeps telling them they're great. Nobody is pointing out where the negatives are and what they can work on.
Yeah.
They get so jaded and the egos build and etc. We can go on and on and on. So
Yeah. One
I
thing I do though is that sometimes I'll personally do a reality check on a band, like you say, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're not going to get Rolling Stone. You're probably not going to get Decibel because you're brand new, blah, 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 blah. And they'll be like, yep, totally got it. Totally understand. Then you start the campaign and they're like, where's my Metal Sucks? Where's my Decibel? Where's my Rolex? Even after you I've even had a client recently, same thing. We had many phone conversations. You're not going to get Decibel. You're not Decibel. Right.
I think they also don't understand how hard the PR job is.
Yeah.
PR job is very stressful. I find this a very stressful job because there's time sensitivities and demands for deliverables and stuff. And like, if some people don't get it, they don't get it, and they get upset with you, and they don't understand there's only so many times you can try to ask a publication to cover an album,
Mm-hmm.
etc. You don't want to burn bridges. So I think, that's the thing. Some bands just don't get that part of the PR, behind the PR scene and the industry.
Yeah.
I get the impression distinctly from some of the bands that I know personally that they look at PRs like they're magicians or something, that all they have to do is be like, hey, Metal Hammer, publish this, and then just walk away or whatever. They don't realize that it's actual like work that you have to do. You're not just some miracle workers that can, hop on a Twitter DM and be like, hey, publish this for me, and then nothing else required.
I find this job, it's actually a super hard job. And I think, I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't find the bands even respect it much. They think it's a one-stop.
Bands and labels alike, honestly. I've seen it from some labels too.
I think it's a one-stop solution to success, right? Some bands have thought, I've gotten that some bands think they hired me once and they'll get the big record deal. And I was like, no, that doesn't know how it works. Or they'll be everywhere and anywhere. And it's really hard. And I'm still super happy when I get a big publication or even I still very happy with small publication, because the way I look at it, somebody took the time and showed interest in your band, in your product, and took time out of their day to showcase you and share it with the world. And you should show the same respect to them. You know what I mean? That's how I look. Big or small, you got some press coverage. There's eyes on it, right? and hopefully it works to some purchases or a longtime fan. I heard one band I love this story. One band I worked with was on tour and they had somebody read them. I got them in the local newspaper in the area. It was in BC. They were touring small town BC, but a fan read the article and drove 200 kilometers to see the band and
Nice.
story. And he was like, dude, I know your job is hard and I want to thank you. I never thought if somebody would drive 200 kilometers just to see my band in this small town, you know.
Awesome.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, you sometimes don't get to hear the stories like that. And that was cool. So, and you know, if we didn't get that newspaper, that probably wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? So
You never really know where the fans are going to see you or find you. So big or small, like I found plenty of bands because of a random thing that I saw that just doesn't like, how did I even run across this?
Yep.
And I've found plenty of bands that way.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer that with PR, you should be seen in everywhere, no matter what size it is, because
I agree.
it's just trying to get eyes on it. And whether it's social media or print or online or radio, 1 to 100,000, you know, I get some bands, you probably get this too, Curtis. I was on Decibel, I was on Metal Hammer, but I don't see the conversion. And I'm like, because, you know, even though it's thousands and thousands and thousands, it's still just one spot. And it's the rules of marketing, I still believe. You got to be seen and heard at least 5 to 10 before you're convinced to check out a band. That was for recently, my example was Hakari, the Hakari Sky band there, the post-black. I just kept seeing them everywhere and everybody raving about them, right? And
they're one of my Bandcamp roulettes.
Yeah, and I checked them out and I was like, man, this is so good. But it took me to see it so many places before I was convinced to check it out.
Yep.
And
I agree.
that's what a lot of what bands need to understand too. It's like you need to be repetition before people are convinced. And then I still firm believer too for bands, live is where you got to sell it. If you don't sell it live, you're dead in the water.
Yep. So. One more thing I wanted to say too is that just on the aspect of PR that a lot of bands don't understand too is that you and I both, I'm assuming you well, John I'm speaking to, is like if we reach out to a writer, they don't always respond to us, even if we know them, and they might ignore us, even if we are like Corinne probably isn't going to ignore me because now I'm doing a podcast with her. She's going to tell me to fuck off if she doesn't want to work
like this.
It's
but,
so.
But, yeah. So So how do you kind of explain that? Like, okay, because like I've had people go to me, okay, well, you do a podcast with Corinne or you do them with Matt when he wrote it Projection, just hook me up. And I'm like, I'm not doing that because, you know, I work with them and I don't think you're right for them. Like, how do you kind of explain that to bands? Like, you know, you're friends with someone, but you know what I mean?
I never make promises. I'll just be like, I know so-and-so. I always say I have a contact and I'll try. No promises. And, you know, sometimes if they don't reply after sometimes we'll go a third time, but I like to go 2 times.
Yeah.
If they don't reply after 2 times, I'm just going to leave it and consider it a pass. You know, it's either they read it and they don't care to reply, because it drives me nuts too, as a publicist, not to have an answer. You know, just even tell me it's a pass and I will off to the next guy, because shopping premieres, I don't know if this has happened to you, you're shopping premieres and sometimes it's like, I usually like to go 1 by 1 each outlet, but sometimes like, I don't think they're going to reply to me. So I go 2, 3 at a time. I'll take 2 at a time. And then it's happened to me where I got all 3 and I'm like, oh man.
That's why I don't like to do it, but I've done it just when I don't happen. Yeah.
But my general rule now is I'll do 1 by 1. And that's why I also tell bands, you got to get everything to me in advance by a month to 6 weeks. Like, because scheduling, also, I try to explain scheduling with these outlets. It's like, you can't just hit them up and then it's the next day. I had this with another band. They're like, so is the premiere tomorrow? I'm like, oh, dude, you just gave me the video today. I still have to watch it. I have to prep materials. it doesn't happen like that. It's not fast.
In some places like or not Metal Injection, Decibel, for example, they'll be booked up. Like a writer will be booked up for like 2-3 months. Like I had that yesterday where
Yeah,
I
I've been
asked,
seeing that
dude,
at Volume actually a lot because Decibel is really in demand, right?
yeah,
So I've been booking for May with Decibel.
yeah.
And
Well, I just got turned down for a June from a writer
oh
that
damn.
book, right? He's like, yeah, this is great, but I'm booked. I'm actually scheduled till like June. And I'm like, oh, damn. Okay.
I didn't have that problem before COVID. I think partially it's because there's more music out.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think about it.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
remember I used to be able to hit them up at least 2 to 4 weeks and be like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
You know, it is the times when we adjust and adapt. That's
Yeah.
how. But you know, you got to explain these things to bands now. This is the way it is right now.
Yeah. Well, one other thing too, also, if you want to briefly go over this, like some sites will not even usually touch a band unless they're on a major label or have a major connection. Like Metal Sucks, for example, will like Ben doesn't publish and Axel don't publish shit basically from new bands anymore. They just don't, because I mean they got Blast Beat, they got to support themselves, right? Can you kind of, what do you say to bands who try to hit you up for Metal Sucks out of curiosity?
Same thing. I give them a reality check and be like, yo, they're mainstream. I consider them mainstream. Loudwire, Metal Injection, Metal Hammer. You know, their Decibel is more. They'll take indie and label. So, but I put them in the mainstream category, and you have to have just something really good, like you know. And that's how I had Immortal Guardian on Metal Sucks a while back, and that's because they're fans of the band, but they're also on the label and they're good. They're really goddamn good. So it's hard to explain that to bands, you know. Also, you know, when I point out things too, it's like I listen carefully to the music too, and you could tell when it's home recording, when it's not, right? So if it's a home recording, I'm also straight out with the bands. I'm like, I hear little mistakes here and there, man. I'm just gonna let you know if you. This is not worthy for the top guys, but if you want to build on the blogs and the online stuff, we can do that. But I want to point out some of them will rip into your production. Just a warning: if you have thick skin and you're ready for some criticism, because not everybody's gonna like your stuff.
Yeah.
Some writers don't care about production. Some do. It's a catch-22. You figure it out.
That's usually the number one thing that gets a no from me is it's not because they're small. It's not because they're not on a big label. It's because their production is just off. And it's like, nope.
I think some home recordings are really good. There's some of these guys who can do really good home recordings.
Some home art, like some you can't tell at all because they put a lot of effort into it and they've built out their home studio to be, you know, to be as functional. So it's not that you can't record at home. It's just that you have to do it really well.
Yeah. And I think with the age of COVID, home recording has been a big thing right now. But if you pull it off and it sounds great, then we can work it, you know.
Totally.
I've turned down a few projects because the home recordings were just awful. So I think
I've gotten some that clearly sounded recorded on a phone or something. Yeah, I'm not even joking.
So you guys, I got to cut us off because we're going to wrap up. But Corinne, do you have any final thing you want to ask Mr. Asher?
No, I think we've covered a lot. He's given a lot of good pointers for people.
Yeah.
What about you? Definitely.
Well, thanks for having me again. This was
What's
awesome.
that?
I said, thanks for having me again. This was awesome.
Well, this is your debut performance on the C Squared podcast. So, John.
Yeah. I'm brand new to this.
This is the debut. This is a new thing. Do you have anything specific you wanna plug before I end off?
Too much.
One. Not everything.
Oh no.
Jon Asher PR show.
I'll leave it as is. Just bands, keep doing what you're doing, and we'll all get back to the road soon enough. And I think I just can't wait for some live music to come back. That's it.
Cool. Okay. And I got one last thing I want to say is thank you, John, for coming on. One thing I do want to point out is John is technically like my competitor, but I like to collaborate with him. And it's good to always, you know, make friends with other people in the industry who are competitors, quote unquote. And I just wanted to point that out. John's been a really good person to talk to, and you should go follow him on Twitter, on Facebook, and I think you got an Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Cool. What's your handle?
Asher Media.
Asher Media. So follow him at Asher Media. Other than that, party on, Corey.
Party on, Curtis. Party on, John.
Cheers, guys.